The Tampa Bay Rays are one of the best-run franchises in recent Major League memory, excelling at getting the best out of some of their players and not spending a ton of money but turning that into Major League success. They sit near the bottom in payroll every single season in Major League Baseball, but they've always had really good players on their roster and players that overperform for them compared to their expectations. 2024 was the first year that this caught up to them, though. A team that just didn't have the firepower on either side of the ball to compete and dealt with some very tough injuries, leading to a season with an under 500 record for the first time since 2017. The Rays bring a different plan into 2025 and expect to be competing again this season. If you enjoy this type of content, please subscribe to the channel. I'll be rolling out the rest of these by opening day. Let's dive into the 2025 Tampa Bay Rays organization. We'll dive into some team ranks here for the Rays. All of these are completely objective. I put my rankings formula in the description of this video, and we have a 19th ranked Major League roster that was really held back by a lineup that finished 26th in baseball last year, a bullpen and rotation that were both very solid, just around top 10 for both of them, and then a Major League defense that was league average, a couple solid defenders, but a couple that didn't bring much for you. The crown jewel of this team and the reason to get so excited for the future, the Rays have the best farm system in baseball given my rankings. A group of Major League hitters with 3 top 100 guys by Baseball America. They land at 2nd in my rankings, and their pitchers are 12th in the rankings for me as well. The manager of this Rays team is Kevin Cash. He's been here for 10 seasons and has been so successful for the Rays. 819 and 699 on the record for him. And then Eric Neander, president of baseball operations, another really long sustained run of success for him. 671 and 493, 577 winning percentage, 5 playoff appearances in 8 seasons here in Tampa Bay. Last season, they took a step back, 80 and 82, 4th in the American League East, a really solid division, and 10th in the American League. Their payroll in 2024 under $100 million at $90 million, and it's going to stay the exact same for 2025, $90 million this year. They're projected to be 82 and 80 this year, although the PECOTA projections don't ever really like them very much just because of the roster talent that they have and the money that they spend on their team. They're also projected a 34.3% chance to make the playoffs this season. Another thing to get really excited about for the Rays, one of the best groups of draft capital that I've ever seen in my life. 6 top 100 picks this year, including 4 in the top 53. The Rays are going to do a lot of work in the draft this year. They acquired one of the picks in a trade, got 2 in compensation rounds. The Rays are loaded up for the draft this year. Into top contracts, Ha-Seong Kim is making $14.5 million. He was brought over on a free agent deal this offseason. He won't start the season on the Major League roster. I'm still going to go over him in this video, though. Brandon Lowe making $10.5 million on arbitration, and Yandy Diaz making $9 million on arbitration as well. Their last playoff appearance was 2023. Lost in the AL wildcard game that year. I don't have park factor on the screen because they're playing in a different stadium this year. We'll talk about that a bit later. In terms of organization success, a lot across the board. AA, High A, and A ball were all very solid teams. Their AAA teams 72 and 78 last season. And that'll get us to our season storylines. The first one for me is the Rays are going to be traveling a lot this year, and they're not going to be playing in their home stadium, the Trop, this year because of damage that was sustained during a hurricane. They're going to be playing at Steinbrenner Field in Florida, a spring training and minor league ballpark. And it also set their schedule up really different this year, so there's going to be a lot of stretches where the Rays are at home for a really long period of time and on the road for a long period of time. It's going to be an interesting season for the Rays to navigate, but I think they can do it. Enough offense is the second storyline that I have here. They didn't have a good season offensively last year. The past couple years have been a bit of a step back in that department as well. They do still have some really solid players. Junior Caminero, pictured here, is coming up through their system. Yandy Diaz, Brandon Lowe. But is that going to be enough to push them to the playoffs this year? And then finally, pitching plan. I have Shane McClanahan pictured here. He's coming back from a major injury, missed the entire season last year. They're currently listed to have a 6-man rotation on Fangraphs, and they really do have about 7 or 8 guys that can contribute at the majors right now. I'm going to be interested to see how they delegate their innings throughout the season this year. So an offseason that by Major League standards probably doesn't seem very big, but for the Rays, a couple pretty big moves here. Ha-Seong Kim, I mentioned, brought in on a 2-year, $29 million deal. He does have a player option after this season. 2.6 projected WAR this year. He will most likely start the season in about May. Danny Jansen, 1-year, $8.5 million deal to be the starting catcher here. He's projected about 2 WAR this season. Joe Boyle, I'm not going to go super deep into him because he's not in the projected rotation right now, but in a trade with the Athletics, a really high stuff and a high power right-handed pitcher. And then Alex Faedo, projected to be part of this bullpen, brought over in a trade with Detroit. On the right side, the subtractions, Jose Siri, their center fielder of the past, traded over to the Mets this offseason. He had just under 2 WAR last year. Jeffrey Springs over to the Athletics in that trade that brought them Joe Boyle. Has been really good here in Tampa in the past. Missed a lot of time due to injuries recently. Austin Shetton traded over to Seattle. He had 0.3 WAR last year. And then Richard Lovelady lost off waivers to Toronto this offseason. 0.1 WAR in 2024. Before I go into the projected lineup, I'll go over some numbers on the screen really quickly. WOBA stands for weighted on base average. Think about it as on base percentage, but everything is weighed differently, meaning a homer is weighed more than a triple, etc. 310 is league average for that, just a better way at measuring how you get on base. Weighted runs created plus, the next stat here, league average for that is 100, just a general offensive productivity stat. Everything above or below that is going to be the percent better or worse that you are compared to league average. A very solid projected lineup for the Rays this year. 3 guys currently projected top 3 at their position in Yandy Diaz, Brandon Lowe, and Junior Caminero. All of them right around 3.3 WAR, Yandy Diaz at 1.2. Diaz projected to be 20% better than league average offensively, 17 homers this year. Brandon Lowe, a big power guy at second base, projected to have 25 homers this season. And then Junior Caminero, a real young guy, just 50 games in the majors so far, projected 26 homers and 3.3 WAR, a super prospect for Tampa Bay. Josh Lowe projected to make a big step forward in 2025 after a tough 2024 season, projected 2.6 WAR, so a big value piece for them. Danny Jansen brought in to be the catcher, 11% better than league average on the projections offensively and under 2 WAR. And then a group of 4 young guys here at the bottom. Jonathan Aranda, a real solid hitter, projected to be 24% better than league average. Won't bring you much on the defensive end. Christopher Morel, a really interesting one. Really struggled when he got traded over to the Rays last year, but I think there's a lot there. Jonny DeLuca, a defense and speed first center fielder, brought over in the Tyler Glasnow trade, actually projected to be a league average hitter, and that's a big plus for him. And then Taylor Walls, a guy who really just doesn't bring a ton to this team. Offensively going to be a bit below average and doesn't bring a ton in defense. Rays are waiting on one of their top prospects to get up to the majors. On the bench, a solid backup catcher in Ben Rortvedt. Curtis Mead, a really solid prospect. He can really play second and third base. Jose Caballero and Richie Palacios, 2 really solid speed options off the bench for the Rays as well. I think a real solid lineup here for Tampa Bay, especially if you get these projected numbers. I think the Rays feel very good about what they have going into 2025. The first 6-man rotation that I've seen projected on Fangraphs so far, we'll get it started with Shane McClanahan. Missed the entire season in 2024 because of an injury. Projected to be really solid, though, a real number 1 for this crew at 3.0 WAR. Taj Bradley, a really solid young pitcher, came up through this system, was a top prospect at one point, had a pretty good season last year for Tampa Bay, projected just under 2 WAR alongside Ryan Pepiot, brought over in the Tyler Glasnow trade as well a couple years ago, 4.04 ERA on the projections. Zack Littell, a guy who really didn't do much of anything in his major league career, Rays brought him over and he was turned into one of the better starters in the game. A great season for Littell last year, projected to take a bit of a step back this season. Shane Baz, another young guy, he was actually brought over in the Chris Archer trade a long time ago. 1.2 WAR on the projections, a 4.39 ERA. And then Drew Rasmussen, incredible pitcher. Some of the stuff for him is just great. Projected to have a 3.33 ERA next year and 2.1 WAR. It'll remain to be seen if he gets most of his work as a starter or out of the bullpen. He did a bit of both last year, 4 starts, but a lot more in the games played area. Some other contributors here, Joe Boyle, Jacob Waguespack, and Joe Rock. We'll go over Joe Rock more in the prospect section of this video. And then another really solid bullpen here for the Rays. Pete Fairbanks, a really good closer, been here for a long time. Really good projected stats for him. Edwin Uceta, one of the more underrated relievers in the game. A great season last year for Tampa Bay. Garrett Cleavinger, pretty good lefty in this bullpen. Projected a 3.86 ERA. Manuel Rodriguez, another guy with under a 4 projected ERA. Mason Montgomery can be a long inning guy out of this bullpen, or he can be just a real solid reliever. A lefty here and a guy who just got up to the majors last season. Alex Faedo, brought over from Detroit this offseason, projected to have a 4.22 ERA. And then Mike Vassell, never gotten run in the majors before, a guy that the Rays have on their roster currently. Not great numbers in the minors last year. The Rays must have seen something in him to have him on this roster, but a real solid Rays bullpen here. So I'll quickly go over some of the stuff on the screen here. The OFF, BSR, DEF are going to be your offense, base running, and defense run values by Baseball Savant. On the Savant page, you're going to have some expected stats on there and some metrics for hard hit rates and plate discipline, alongside some metrics for fielding and some base running metrics. On the cards, there's just going to be a lot of counting stats. Remember, weighted runs created plus league average is 100 and WOBA is 310. And we'll get it started here with Yandy Jansen, brought in on a free agent deal. He's been a very valuable player and a really good hitter in recent years. Last year, a big step back for him though, 11% worse than league average. Just 94 games for him, 9 homers still. Just didn't really do the things that he does well over that full season. He did have a really good year in terms of plate discipline though. A lot of those stats are really good. The walk rate is still way up there. Not a great defender here. Definitely Rortvedt is the better catcher of the two, but he is really solid in the blocking area. So Jansen, a guy who's been with the Blue Jays the last few years, 786 OPS in 2023 and an 855 in 2022. The hard hit rate numbers were just a lot better for him. Even in 2024, where the expected stats weren't great, his barrel rates were still really high, and that really helped him be a better hitter. Real big step back for him post All-Star break last year, a 563 OPS and 108 plate appearances. After a trade over to the Red Sox, he just wasn't very good over there either. I do have hope for Jansen though. His plate discipline numbers are still there, and long term, I think those hard hit rates are going to come back. Just 29 years old as a catcher. And then the left-handed side of this group, Ben Rortvedt, much better on the defensive end. Not as good of a hitter, although the walk rate is pretty solid for him. 112 games last year for Tampa Bay, so they really rolled him out there. 62nd percentile in defensive run value. Had been with the Yankees and Twins organizations in the past. Never really gotten a ton of run at the major league level, but some really good minor league stats for him over the years. Always a really good eye at the plate, and thus has really solid on base numbers. The real better defensive catcher out of this group, Ben Rortvedt and Yandy Jansen, 2 catchers here, make up a pretty solid platoon, I think, for the Rays. Also want to mention 2 Wisconsin high school catchers being on the same roster just means something to me. Yandy Jansen and Ben Rortvedt, your catching crew here. Yandy Diaz, one of the best bats in the game, but one of the more mind-numbing players of all time. Every stat offensively is very good for him, except for the fact that he just doesn't hit the ball in the air compared to league average. Look at where his launch angle sweet spot percentage is. That's the percent of the time that you hit the ball in the launch angle sweet spot of 8 to 24 degrees, all the way down there in the bottom 10th percentile in baseball. Kind of been a problem for him his entire career. 2023, he took a step forward in that area and saw the best results of his career. You know, even given that, he's still a really good player. 4.2 WAR per 162, 20% better than league average. Just not going to give you the power numbers because of that. Not much in the fielding or defense department either. 600 plate appearances in 2023 to a 932 OPS. Took a pretty sizable step back last year. Although the numbers on the Savant page weren't much different, it's really just that launch angle sweet spot percentage. It still was only in the 14th percentile in 2023. But again, anything is a step forward for him. Also, the walk rate and barrel rate went down a little bit last year, but everything else is still really solid. I would expect Yandy Diaz to have a really good year this year. A guy who's going to hit the ball harder than anyone, but really just needs to hit it in the air to become a superstar player, in my opinion. 33 years old, Yandy Diaz is your first baseman for the Rays. Brandon Lowe here at second base, a left-handed hitting second baseman and one of the best power bats at the position in the game. Just hits the ball very hard. He does have some swing and miss in his game, though. The walk rates, the whiff rates, the chase rates are all in the bottom percentiles in baseball. A real solid base runner though, and he gives you about league average defense, so he can be a really valuable player. A guy who's going to derive a majority of his value from being an above average hitter at second base. In 2023 though, he was in the 85th percentile in range, so he's shown signs of being an above average second baseman. Last season for him, the walk rate did go down by a decent amount, which is a bit scary, but a lot of the advanced numbers are still there for him. All the hard hit stuff is pretty similar. Took a step up in overall offensive production last season, was hitting the ball at much more advantageous launch angles. 2023 way down there in launch angle sweet spot percent. Bit of a better hitter in the first half last year, but the second half wasn't bad either. 757 OPS, just wasn't getting on base as much, but the slugging was right around the same for him. A pretty solid second baseman here and a real good hitter for the Tampa Bay Rays. I'm going to take this time to plant my flag on the junior Caminero wave. I think he's going to be a great player this year. He's shown a lot of good signs in the majors. My favorite thing for him, the bat speed is there. The barrel rate is there. The hard hit rate is there. So he hasn't shown issues hitting the ball hard in the majors. He's just struggled a bit with walking. The whiff rate and chase rates are down there a little bit, but a real solid prospect. He was one of the top prospects in the entire league heading into last season. Got some run, 43 games in the major league level, 5% better than league average offensively. Very valuable over there as well, right around a league average defender. The Rays believe in Caminero. They see him as their guy, and they think he's going to take a huge step forward this season offensively. I agree there as well. With his minor league numbers, he's been really solid the past couple of years too. Last season, 59 games in the minors and 858 OPS. The walk rate was actually a bit higher down there as well. 2023, 975 OPS between high A and double A. 31 homers in 117 games down there that year. And in 2024, also 16 homers in 59 games. Caminero absolutely has it. He's got the potential to be one of the best players in the game offensively. I think the walk to strikeout thing can be a bit concerning long term, but he just has the bat to ball skills. He's got a lot of pop, and he can be an above average defender. I think the Rays got a good one in Junior Caminero here at third base. We get to the first real iffy hitter in the lineup for Tampa Bay here. Taylor Walls, more of a placeholder than anything while they wait for some of their prospects to come back and Ha-Seong Kim to take over the spot this year. Just doesn't do a lot offensively. The walk rate is up there. The chase rate is up there, but everything else just not very good. Doesn't hit the ball very hard. Below average as a defender. Is a decent runner. Just not a lot here. Taylor Walls, 28 years old. Never been an above average hitter or defender at the major league level. He's a solid base runner. Could be a nice bench piece when Ha-Seong Kim comes back from injury or when Carson Williams gets called up to take this spot. But just not a ton to expect from Taylor Walls this season. He is a switch hitter though. Will still be in this organization until 2028. A real polarizing one here for the Rays. Christopher Morel, brought over in a trade last season from the Chicago Cubs in the Isaac Paredes deal, was really solid for Chicago really the last 2.5 years in the majors. Came over to Tampa and really struggled last season. Could be a new organization thing, could be struggled hitting at the Trop, could be a lot of things for Morel, but it really just wasn't there when he came over to Tampa. Does do some things really well, really good arm, just not great in the range department. Bat speed is really solid. He has some hard hit numbers that are really good, specifically in the past. I don't know if he's a left fielder long term. He came up as a third baseman. Doesn't really have a set position right now, but I think the Rays are just throwing him out there because they like what they see from the bat. Last season for Chicago, 26 homers and 821 OPS. All of the hard hit numbers are so far up there in baseball. The barrel rate, hard hit rate, and average exit velocity in the top 10th percentile. So Morel's shown he can do it. He has great bat speed. He has great hard hit skills. He does whiff and strike out a bit too much. The walk rate was about league average in that 2023 season. I'm hoping for a clean slate for Christopher Morel because I think there's a lot in that bat. If he figures out how to hit the ball in the air more often and not strike out a lot, this becomes a really solid hitter. Just a tale of two halves last year for Morel, even though not a great start last year. 675 OPS with Chicago, a 547 with Tampa, compared to an 821 the year before and a 741 in his rookie season. I think a real step back for Morel last year. I think I personally and the Rays do feel good about what Morel can bring long term, though, only 25 years old. Jonny DeLuca, the center fielder here, brought over from the Dodgers in the Tyler Glasnow trade a couple years ago. One of the higher floor guys in the league just because of the fact that he plays an incredible center field and he is super fast, really good in the base running category as well. Just 26 years old, hasn't shown much of a major league profile offensively, but he does have some really good minor league numbers. A 2023 season in the minors with a 956 OPS, 17 homers in 73 games, just 55 strikeouts to 35 walks in those games. He's been really solid in the minors his entire career. A bit older as a guy who hasn't had a ton of major league experience. Not a dude who's going to hit the ball super hard, but as I mentioned, just a super high floor player. If he can bring you anything offensively, you feel so good about what he can bring to this team. Got to work on hitting the ball a bit harder. The plate discipline stuff isn't terrible though, which I think is a pretty solid sign. Jonny DeLuca, a real high floor center fielder here for the Rays. Josh Lowe over here in right field, a guy who took a really big step back after a really good 2023 season. Really solid signs for him though, because he still has really good hard hit numbers. He's about a league average defender and he can bring a lot for you on the base running side. 2023 an 835 OPS. Last year, a 693. Really the big thing for Lowe last year, he just struck out too much to really put together a good season. 2023, 32nd percentile in K percentage with that 835 OPS. All the expected numbers were way better. Lowe's just got to put the ball in play and good things are going to happen. Overall, a guy that could be a real solid value as a right fielder. He's going to crush right-handed pitching regardless of how he's feeling at the plate. Doesn't walk a ton. The plate discipline stuff isn't great for him, but he just hits the ball so hard. And even last year in a down year was still hitting the ball really hard when he was making contact. I feel good about Lowe to make a step forward in 2025. He's just got to cut some of those strikeout, whiff rate, chase rate numbers down. Jonathan Aranda at DH, one of these Rays guys that just pops up out of nowhere. One of the best dudes in the league at hitting the ball hard. The barrel rate, hard hit rate, average exit velocity, and all the expected numbers are just way up there for him. Doesn't really struggle in the plate discipline area either. The whiff rates and chase rates are pretty solid. Walks about a league average amount. He was 13% better than league average last year, and he underperformed a lot of his stats by a lot. Just 44 games for him. The expected WOBA was 42 points higher than the actual WOBA he gave last year. The slugging was well above what he put out there. A pretty insane turnaround offensively for Aranda. In 2023, he wasn't really up there in any of these hard hit stats at all. Hard hit rate was a bit above average, but all of the expected stats, the barrel rates were way down there for Aranda. A real good turnaround at the plate. A guy who's going to play first base mostly when he's out there, but just not a great defender, so he'll most likely be in this DH spot a lot. Took a huge step forward in the chase rate, whiff rate, and strikeout rates last season, so I think if you combine that with these hard hit numbers, you can expect a real solid season out of Jonathan Aranda in 2025. Your designated hitter here for the Rays. And then I'll do a Ha-Seong Kim slide here. Injured right now, sounds like he's going to come back around May this season, but just an incredible player. The Rays trusted him to give him the biggest contract on this team. 4 WAR per 162 the last 3 seasons. He was about a league average hitter last year, but just so good in some of the plate discipline numbers. An incredible defender, a really solid base runner. He's been moving between shortstop and second base his entire career. I would expect him to slot in at shortstop when he gets back here for the Rays and take Taylor Wall's spot. One of the rare guys in the league that I think is actually a better shortstop defender than a second base defender. His numbers there actually grade out a lot better. Took a step forward offensively in some of the hard hit numbers last year. All of the plate discipline stuff is very similar. You want to talk about a high floor guy, Ha-Seong Kim is the dude that you need to be talking about. Just really solid all areas of the game. The Rays saw a lot in Ha-Seong Kim, even though he was injured. They gave him the biggest contract on their roster right now. Look out for Ha-Seong Kim in the second half because I think you're going to like a lot of the things that you see from him. So getting into this bench, 2 real speed guys here in Jose Caballero and Richie Palacios. 44 stolen bases last year for Jose Caballero. 28-year-old really valuable player, 2.5 WAR per 162. Never been a super solid hitter in the majors, but can play a lot of spots and brings you a lot of value with that speed. Richie Palacios also pretty fast, 19 stolen bases in 92 games. He can walk at any time. He was about league average as a hitter last year, 1.3 WAR per 162. And then Curtis Mead, a prospect coming up through the system, 24 years old, mostly a third baseman, can play some second base too. Real solid numbers in the minors, real solid on the bat speed and launch angle sweet spot metrics, just hasn't really got it going yet. I would expect him to play a lot this season. On the screen here for pitchers, we're going to have a lot of the same. On the right side are going to be run values again, pitching run value, fastball run value, breaking run value, off-speed run value. On the left side, you're going to have pitches, usage rate, and miles per hour. And then the middle, a lot of expected stats. Plate discipline stats against, and then hard hit stats against, so very similar. On the card, Stuff Plus and Location Plus, models built by Eno Saris at Fangraphs. Really just a measure of how good your stuff is and how good you are at locating pitches. League average for that is going to be 100. And we'll get started with Shane McClanahan here, the ace of this rotation, a guy who missed the entire season last year. On the screen are his 2023 ranks. Been super valuable for this team, just under 3 WAR per season since he's been out there, and that includes a shortened 2023 year after he got hurt. Throws a lot of fastball, but his bread and butter is really his off-speed pitches, 98th percentile in that area. Gets a lot of whiffs and a lot of chases. The FIP didn't like him as much as the ERA. I think that has a lot to do with his walk rate. I think he could do a lot better at that. And he gave up some pretty hard contact that season as well, but a guy that the Rays are going to welcome back with open arms. They really needed the innings that McClanahan could give them, and real solid ones at that. A 2022 insane season from Shane McClanahan, a 2.54 ERA and 166 innings, 194 strikeouts, legitimately all red on that Baseball Savant page. His breaking pitches took a bit of a step back in 2023, so I think that's where he can take that step back to being a Cy Young level pitcher. Catching a couple things on him, it seems like his velocity is back to where it has been in the past, which is a real solid sign for McClanahan. A lefty starter and a really, really good one at that. A former first-round pick in 2018 and a top prospect for the Rays. Came up and has been every part of that. Shane McClanahan, a real solid one in this rotation for Tampa. Taj Bradley, the 2 in this rotation, a righty, another real solid prospect coming up through the system a couple years ago. Got some run in 23 and 24. Solid numbers last year, just about a 4 on the ERA and the FIP. The stuff was really good for him last year, really needs to work on that location for his pitches, but I think that is a really good sign for him because that hasn't been something that's been a super big crutch for him in the minors. The walk rate is about league average there for him last year, did give up a lot of hard contact, average exit velocity in the 2nd percentile, barrel rate and hard hit rate also way down there. Another guy that's really good with his off-speed pitches, 88th percentile for him there. The fastball is just about league average. The breaking pitch was not a positive for him last year, but it's one that I think can be really good. The splitter at just about 91 miles per hour on average. But a real big step forward for Taj Bradley in 2024, a 5.59 ERA in his first run in 2023, 104 innings that year. Last season, all the way down to a 4.11 on ERA. That fastball took a huge jump forward for him last year, and the off-speed pitches were really good. A guy with a lot of minor league pedigree. He's been down there for a while and he's been doing it. A 22 season in the minors for Bradley, a 2.57 ERA over 133.1 innings, 141 strikeouts there. I think Taj Bradley's got it. Real solid pitcher, real solid stuff. Needs to work on that location a bit, but the Rays definitely believe in Taj Bradley as their number 2. Ryan Pepiot, the 3 here, the other part of that Tyler Glasnow trade, a really good season for him last year and a lot more that you can expect from him. A 3.60 ERA, above average stuff and location last year, got a lot of strikeouts. All the expected numbers really liked him. Well above average on the 4-seam and the cutter. The rest of the pitchers kind of got hit around a bit last year, but a guy who's really learning how to pitch in the majors still, 27 years old, gets a lot of strikeouts on his pitches, a lot of whiffs. 3 seasons of run in the majors for Pepiot. The last 2 were pretty short, but a 2.14 ERA over 42 innings and then a 3.47 over 36.1. Really been good the entire time. Really solid minor league numbers. I think the Rays really like Ryan Pepiot. They might even see him as a long-term 1 for this team. Even generated more chases, had a lower hard hit rate and average exit velocity in 2023. The walk rate was also way down there. I think that's more of what we're going to see from Ryan Pepiot this year. I expect a huge step forward from him in 2025. A really good story here in Zack Littell, a guy who was kind of bouncing around. The Rays got him and they said, you know what, dude, your fastball isn't incredible. Throw those off-speed pitches all the time and we're going to start you. And man, he has been one of the better pitchers in baseball. A real solid control guy. The walk rate is all the way up there in percentile. Really good breaking pitches last year. The fastball actually played above average as well, 60th percentile. Just really good numbers for him, a 3.63 ERA. The stuff isn't great, and that's obviously what you can see from him, but he's really good at locating those pitches. The expected numbers didn't like him as much, so I wouldn't expect these results that you got from him last year. But a guy that could just pitch, and that's what he did for the Rays last season. A guy who's mostly been a reliever in his career, only 4 starts before he came over to Tampa, but that's what he's been doing a majority of the time here. In his 2 stints with Tampa, half of 2023 and 2024, a 3.93 and a 3.63 ERA. Just another example of a Tampa reclamation project, a guy who's been really good for Tampa and can give him a lot of innings out of this rotation. Really good story in Zack Littell. Shane Baz here, you might remember him from the Chris Archer trade a long time ago. Really good stats for him last season, a 3.06 ERA, just about average in stuff and location, really good on the expected numbers. Didn't get a lot of chases last year, and that really hurt his strikeout rate. And gave up some hard contact as well. The hard hit rate and average exit velocity are down there, but did some things really solid. All of his pitches were above average in run value last year, and as a pitcher, 73rd percentile. 14 starts for Baz last year. He's been dealing with some injuries the past couple years and really hasn't gotten a chance to pitch a full season in the majors. A 2021 sample, although it was 4 years ago, that is one of the more impressive 12-inning stints that you're going to see in the majors in terms of the metrics. The K rates are way up there. Whiff rates are way up there. All the expected numbers really liked him. 2022 struggled a bit and then missed almost all of 23 and 24. Got 79.1 innings last year, but all of 2023 he was out. Incredible minor league numbers for Baz. He's been a top prospect for a long time. Career in the minors, a 3.15 ERA in 288 innings, 342 strikeouts to just 120 walks. So he has the pedigree. I think I'm expecting a good season out of Shane Baz here as well. It seems like I'm saying that with a lot of these Rays pitchers. And then Drew Rasmussen here as the 6, currently listed in the rotation, although he mostly came out of the bullpen last year, had been a really solid starter for Tampa in the past and dealt with some injuries. You see the Savant page, he does literally everything well. A 2.82 ERA last season, 21% better in stuff last year compared to league average, above average in location, all the expected numbers love him. Gets strikeouts, doesn't walk guys, doesn't give up hard contact. Not a huge sample for him last year, but we see a lot of this in his stints in the past. A guy who was acquired from the Brewers in the Willy Adames trade a couple seasons ago. 2023, a 2.62 ERA in 44 innings. 2022, a 2.84 ERA in 146 innings. Over a bigger sample, hasn't shown to get as many strikeouts, at least not as a starter. As a reliever, he was incredible last year. Another one of these Rays guys that's kind of dealt with injuries and hasn't been able to be out there all the time. I think if Rasmussen is a starter, he might be the second best guy out of this group. Although I like a lot of the guys here, I think he just does everything so well as a pitcher. The Rays have a legitimate six-man rotation here, and I think this is one of the best rotations in baseball. A solid back end of the bullpen here in Tampa as well. Pete Fairbanks, really good numbers last year, 3.57 ERA. The stuff is 26% better than league average, strikes out just about 24% of the guys he faces. Has been a lot better in the past, a 2.58 ERA in 23 and a 1.13 in 22 and 24 innings. Doesn't generate as many chases or whiffs on his pitches as he did in the past, and that really hurt his strikeout rates. The fastball run value just wasn't as good for him last season, and that resulted in the ERA numbers going up, but I think a real solid closer and one that the Rays believe in. Edwin Uceta, though, I think might be your long-term option because, geez, he does a lot of things well. Everything on the Savant page except for fastball velo and ground ball rate, it's all up there in the top 15th percentile. A 1.51 ERA in 41.2 innings last season for Tampa. All of his pitches are really good. The breaking pitch just a bit behind the other two, but does a lot of things well. Edwin Uceta strikes out about 36% of the batters he faces, doesn't really walk many either. A really good 8th inning guy for Tampa. And then Garrett Cleavinger, the lefty in this pen, struck out about 27% of the guys that he faced last year, but does have a bit of a walk issue, just about 12% on that rate. The ERA was all right last year. The FIP wasn't very good. The stuff is really solid for him, but really just struggled locating his pitches. A guy who's always struggled with command in his career, but does a lot of things good. Gave up a bit too many barrels last season, and that really hurt his ERA as well, but does get a lot of strikeouts, and the hard hit rate isn't super high for him. I think a really good back end of this bullpen as well for the Rays. The pitching is definitely a positive here. A couple guys here that the Rays believe in a lot too. Manuel Rodriguez, 37.2 innings last year, a 2.15 ERA for him. Doesn't get as many strikeouts, doesn't get a lot of chases or whiffs, but he does not give up a lot of hard contact. The expected numbers liked him a lot last year also. Mason Montgomery, more of a long inning guy than anything, but 9.2 innings in the majors last year, 1.86 ERA. He started some games in the past. The strikeout rate is pretty insane. A really small sample, though. He's obviously not going to do that over a long period. The ground ball rate around 60% for him last year, too. Some really solid minor league numbers for Montgomery. It's still only 24 years old. He's a prospect in the system right now. Alex Faedo brought over in a trade from Detroit. Some good numbers last year. Walked too many guys also, a thing that the Rays think maybe they can fix. Just about 60 innings last year, a 3.61 ERA for him. And then Mike Vasil never pitched in the majors before. AAA last year, 6.04 ERA, a 5.75 FIP. Not super good on the strikeout or walk numbers. Interested to see what the Rays tap into with him because he's a guy that hasn't really shown success at any level so far. But I think if the Rays want him on their roster, there's got to be something here. So the rest of the bullpen for Tampa isn't as good as the back end, but I think a really solid group of pitchers in general. So let's get into a top prospect group here that starts with Carson Williams at shortstop, a top 100 guy and a top 11 guy in all of baseball. 21 years old, a 60 on the Baseball America grade, got up to Double-A last year, 42% better than league average offensively, 20 homers, an incredible defender in Carson Williams. This is the guy that the Rays are waiting on. That's why they haven't gone out and made a big splash at shortstop or anything like that. They want him to be their long-term shortstop, and I think he will be. Does a lot of things really well. The hitting has been a lot better than I even think people expected from him. Just great defense, great power, great athleticism from Carson Williams. A real high floor guy in the fact that he's going to be a real solid defender at shortstop as well. Feel really good about Carson Williams long term. Brayden Taylor, another top 100 guy, 65 in the top 100, 22 years old, not as high on the Baseball America grade, but really good offensively, not as good as a defender. Baseball America lists him as a really boring prospect, but in a good way because he does everything really solid across the board. Not the best defender, not the flashiest hitter, but he just does things things really well. Most likely to be up in the majors this year. Every single tool is a 50, so that's a positive tool across the board. He should be in AAA for most of the season, but I think eventually he'll most likely be your second baseman. Wouldn't say he has superstar potential, but definitely could be a regular for a long time in the majors. And then Trey Morgan, number 80 in the top 100. Incredible numbers last year in the minors. 158 weighted runs created plus. Definitely more of a hit than a power guy. 65 on the hit tool, but a really solid defender at first base. 80 field, a 60 arm, and about league average on the running. Big time hitter at LSU out of college. A really good player there. Always been really good as a hitter. One of the more polished guys here in this system. They say on Baseball America he could play a league average left field, so if that's where he ends up long term, I wouldn't hate it, but if he's at first base, he might be the best defender in the league. Carson Williams, a first-round pick, Trey Morgan, a third-round pick, and Braden Taylor, a first-round pick. Just a real solid top three in this Rays system that is the best in baseball. We'll go into notable infield prospects here to another guy that's top 100 in Xavier Isaac, a first baseman with real solid power, a former first-round pick by Tampa Bay, had some real strikeout issues last year as he got up in the higher levels of the minors, but I think that's something that he could definitely fix over time. A lot of the tools are really good for him, nothing below average. The power is really good, and run for a guy his size is definitely a plus. A plus power and hit first baseman with a lot of tools to his name. Emilian Pitre, a second base prospect with a really good hit tool and some really good defensive tools as well. Got up to high A last season. Some really good numbers in the minors last year. Just 21 games in low A, a 402 on base and a 403 slug for him. Drafted out of Kentucky as a second baseman, Rays liked him a lot more than his projections, and they took him in the second round. Dominic Keegan, a catching prospect here for the Rays. A solid defender behind the plate, although not a flashy one. A guy with a good hit tool. The power is a bit below average. Got up to AA last year. It seems like he's ready for AAA. Just has to take that step forward defensively to show that he could be an MLB player, but their number 16 prospect. Cooper Kinney, number 21 in the system. 22 years old, 55 hit, 55 run, good fielding, good arm. Another solid second baseman here in this Rays system. Seems like he's ready for AA, and he will probably be playing there. Dealt with some injuries in the past couple seasons, so he hasn't had a full year. Missed the entire 2022 season with that injury, but a solid second baseman. And then Gregory Barrios, brought over in the Aaron Savali trade from the Brewers. A good shortstop, really good on the defensive side. Hasn't really developed as much as a hitter. Has a good recognition of the strike zone, just doesn't really have the pop to make him a plus hitter, but a good defender at short. Chandler Simpson, maybe the fastest guy in all of baseball right now as an outfielder, does a lot of things really well. A really good comp for him is Juan Pierre. That's what they list on the Baseball America page. A 70 hit tool, but a 20 power. 80 run, and just below average in fielding. 198 stolen bases over the past 2 seasons for Chandler Simpson. A real extreme runner and a real extreme hitter. Needs to work on that defense a bit, but it seems like he's going to be a guy that can really hit in the majors. Theo Gillen, a 2024 draft pick, did miss 2023 with an injury, but got drafted by the Rays that year. Got up to low A last season. Pretty solid numbers there. Sounds like he's going to be down there for a majority of the season. Really good on the hit and power tools. The run is above average as well. Seems like he could be one of these guys that develops really quickly. A high school draft pick, still only 19 years old. Aiden Smith, another outfielder that doesn't have a below average tool, got traded to Tampa in the Randy Arozarena trade. Really good at base stealing, really good defensively, and he's got a lot of potential at offense. Definitely the Rays type in terms of a guy that could play the corner outfield. A 4th round pick by the Mariners in 2023 and still only 20 years old. Homer Bush over to the Rays in the Jason Adam trade in the 2024 deadline. Another guy like Simpson who has incredible speed, but this time a really good defender, just doesn't have the hit tool that Simpson has. 80 on the run tool, 70 on the field. Didn't have great plate discipline last season, struck out just way too much. Baseball America says he could play plus defense in the majors as of right now, and I totally agree with that. Not the best arm and not the best hit tool, but a really good defender and really solid in the speed category. And then we'll get into a loaded pitching crew. Trevor Harrison to lead it off, the number 5 prospect in this system. A plus fastball, sits around 95, touches 98 and 99 in his start. The changeup and curveball are both above average pitches. One of the 3 guys here that I'll talk about that had really good seasons in Class A last year. 5th round pick in 2023, Gary Gill-Hill, 2024, really solid season in A-ball. Didn't seem to be a super high prospect, but absolutely flew up the ranks last year. Plus fastball, plus slider, and the changeup and cutter are both solid pitches, really good control. can reach up to 96, 97 on that fastball, and made a couple changes to his mechanics that really allowed him to be a solid pitcher last year. Would guess he would remain a starter long term, but he could be a reliever because the fastball and slider are both really good pitches. And then we'll go into Santiago Suarez, the other guy here that was an A-ball, acquired from the Marlins for Xavier Edwards in 2022, but a really good season for Suarez last year. Plus fastball, plus curveball, plus cutter. The control is way up there, a 70 grade on it. Another guy who touches 97, 98, and sits about 95 in his starts. Jackson Baumeister, acquired from the Rays in the Zach Eflin deal in 2024. Doesn't have super good velocity on his pitches, but has a lot of movement on that fastball. That's a 60 grade for him. A guy that doesn't have real good command, really hurt himself with walk issues. But after he came over to Tampa, really developed that. 13.9 walk rate with the Orioles. As a Ray, it was 4.8%. The slider, a decent pitch. The changeup and curveball need development, and I think that's where he can take another step as a pitcher. A couple other good pitchers in the system I'm not going to touch on as much, but I'm going to go over Joe Rock because I think he might contribute to the Major League team this year. A left-handed starter, 6'6", 200, real solid slider, good control for him as well. An interesting delivery, kind of a fun guy to watch as a pitcher. Got him from Colorado last season. Didn't have great numbers with Tampa last year, but a guy who had been good for Colorado when he was over there. Currently on the 40-man roster, so I would guess he's going to throw some innings in the majors this year. Not a super hard thrower, but a guy that does some things pretty interesting as a lefty pitcher. Needs a bit of development on that fastball and changeup to really be a solid guy, but definitely could be a back end of the rotation pitcher. A really good system for Tampa Bay here, and my best system in all of baseball. I love a lot of these prospects that Tampa has. And I'm going to go over the projected 2028 lineup by Baseball America as well, because I think it's really fun to project these teams out long term. A lot of prospects here, not a ton of guys that are already in the majors. For the Rays, though, Junior Caminero already up in the major leagues, and then Curtis Mead, but that is it out of major league roster players right now on this projected 2028 lineup by Baseball America. Dominic Keegan, we talked about him, a catcher prospect, needs to develop a bit defensively, but can't hit. Trey Morgan, a top 100 guy at first base, would step in and immediately be one of the best defenders in the league there. Braden Taylor at second base long term. They have a moving on for both Yandy Diaz and Brandon Lowe, which I think is something the Rays would do. Carson Williams, their long-term guy at short, totally agree. I think he's going to be up here sooner rather than later. Depending on the Ha-Seong Kim injury, maybe some point this season. Theo Gillen in center, just 22 years old in 2028, a high school guy. And then Xavier Isaac, they have making the transition out to right field. That would be really interesting for him. I would like to see how he performs in the outfield. They're currently a first baseman in their minor league system. And then Curtis Mead and Caminero, I think will both be plus prospects. Maybe Mead could be an outfielder as well. We could see if that defense could maybe translate to right field, switch a guy like Isaac to DH. But I'm really liking what I'm seeing from this projected 2028 lineup. I like a lot of these prospects. 3 top 100 guys and Junior Caminero, a former top prospect alongside Curtis Mead. A projected 2028 rotation, though, that does have some major league guys here. Taj Bradley and Pepiot already on this major league roster. They do have Taj long-term as the one starter. Some really good numbers in the majors when he's been up for him, but just hasn't really shown the ability to stay on the field. If he can do that this year, I think he definitely becomes more of a projectable high-end starter. Love what I saw out of Ryan Pepiot last year. I think Taj Bradley has another gear in him in terms of results, and that's something I think we'll see on the field as soon as this season. And then Trevor Harrison, Santiago Suarez, and Gary Gillihill, they have all up in the majors by 2028. I don't know if I completely agree with that. They'll all three be super young, but all three of them I think can be really solid starters. I would assume they have Gillihill moving to closer just because of the fact that he has 2+ pitches, but I would expect him to stay as a starter as long as possible. I think his numbers were really good last year. But long-term, love this projected 2028 rotation and closer. This is a really good group. The Rays minor league prospects in terms of pitching are definitely hurt by the fact that they have 3 guys that are already up in the majors, really young and already contributing. But a real solid group, both offensively and on the pitching side for their farm system. Going into just some final thoughts on the Rays, their projected win total I think is super low. 80 and 82 by PECOTA this year. I think that's really the low end of the spectrum spectrum in terms of what they can do. They just have such a high floor as a ceiling because of the fact that the pitching is so good. A bullpen that I think could use some work. A lot of the names in there I'm not 100% set on. Guys like Mike Vasil, don't really know what you're going to get out of him in the majors. Although there's a couple guys already on the 40-man that could give them some innings this year. Just not as sold on the bullpen compared to the rest of the team. But I love this rotation. I think this has the ability to be one of the best rotations in the league. We're getting McClanahan back from injury. I think Pepiot is going to take a step forward. Boz and Bradley will all make a step forward this year. Drew Rasmussen has shown that he's been an incredible pitcher. I think he's going to have a really good year this year as well. I think their offense took a bit of a step back last year, and I don't think I see that happening in 2025. Just like a lot of the numbers that I saw out of the guys, dudes like Caminero, Morel, and DeLuca, I would expect their seasons to look a lot different this year, and I like those three guys to really take a step forward. Ha-Seong Kim's going to be coming back at some point to bring value to this team. Honestly, like the team in all areas, I think the lineup is a top half lineup, especially with Diaz and Lowe still being here. I think Caminero is going to make that step forward and really be a top third baseman in this league. Love the rotation. A lot of things in there that I think are really going to work over a full year. The bullpen is more of a question mark, more of a pivot point, but I think if they're good, they can acquire a reliever at the deadline that can really push them forward. A lot of things to like here from the 2025 Tampa Bay Rays. I think really the only question is, can those guys take the step forward in 2025 as the youth, and can some of the guys that didn't perform as well last season just make a jump back to 2023? I see this as a playoff team, though. I like the Rays this year. This was a really fun one to do, a team that runs themselves differently than a lot of other organizations. This was a breakdown of the 2025 Tampa Bay Rays organization, Major League roster, and farm system.